castle. Yeah, we need more castles. We gotta keep the lead. Yes.
Well, staying with Disneyland Paris, Tom, I'd love to ask you about the design of the castle.
Okay, well, I was the show producer for Fantasyland in Disneyland Paris, and also oversaw the design of the castle at Disneyland Paris. And of course, it was challenging because Paris is like, you know, the land of castles, or France. There are over 40,000 castles, I found that out afterwards, thank God, that are in France, and so we didn't want ours to look like any one of those. Ours had to really stand out from the rest. So we actually explored a lot of storybooks and a lot of artwork from old books from the 18th century that wonderful library at Walt Disney Imagineering has. And from that, we put together a style board and created a castle that was unlike any other castle that anyone can find in Europe. But we made sure to give it a little bit of a French accent, so it still looks French, but it looks like a French fantasy castle.
I have to ask about one of the details on the castle.
Okay.
The escargot, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Why are there snails on the castle?
There's a rumor that kind of an urban myth has been created that the snails are escaping the French chefs that are inside of them. I hadn't heard that one. I was there when the idea was sprung on me, and Walt Disney always believed that if someone has a good idea, take it from anyone, regardless of what their position in the company is. And there was an architect who was one of the architects, actually a draftsman, working on it, and he drew up that spire with snails on it. And he said, what if we put snails on this spire? And I don't think he was expecting me to like it, but I thought it was a great idea. So I just said, let's do it. And that's the only story there is behind why there's snails.
Well, are there any other hidden Easter eggs that you and your team hide in these structures?
Yeah, absolutely. Imagineers love Easter eggs. So every castle is very unique and has a ton of detail, but we like to make nods to different cultures and different people.
Yeah, the mosaics that are inside of the Cinderella Castle here, I don't know if anyone knows, but when Dorothea Redmond designed this, she included John Hench and Herb Ryman in the mosaic. That was something that we were taught really early on, and I just remembered it recently, and I hope it's a story that doesn't get forgotten, because that is actually a true story.
That's such a special way to, first of all, leave an Easter egg, but also tie in the artists who build these structures into the permanent history of the building. It's really beautiful.
Right, and also the Disney family crest appears on all of the Disneyland castle, or all of the Disney Magic Kingdoms, and but it wasn't originally so, because the Disney family didn't have their coat of arms. They didn't know what it was until they went to Lincolnshire, England, for the specific reason of getting more of their family tree history and also acquiring a good model of the coat of arms. So that was shipped back to the United States, and Disneyland made a modified sculpture of that coat of arms, and it ended up on Disneyland and then Walt Disney World. Disneyland Paris, we have it off on the side, and it's been included on all of the castles since then.
I love the links that y'all go to for every detail.
Yeah, one of my favorite is at Enchanted Storybook Castle in Shanghai. There's actually a set of swans at the entrance, and they represent the women in Walt Disney's life, which I think is really sweet. So there's one for his mother, Flora, one for his wife, Lillian, and two for his daughters. It's sweet.
It's sweet. And now that we've mentioned the international castles, Jason, I'd love to hear from you. Can we talk about attractions in the castle, specifically in Tokyo?
Yeah, absolutely. Wyatt mentioned earlier, we build castles with a lot of things inside of them, and I talked earlier today about my first trip to Tokyo, and the two things I had to do was Mickey Mouse Review, and then the second one was the Castle Mystery Tour, because it was unlike anything. We have a Castle Mystery Tour for it was like anything that we had in any other castle, and I had to go see it, and Wyatt and I had a very similar time there, it was just so exciting to go into the castle and feel like you're actually in a castle.
Yeah, so here's some video for those that didn't get to see it in person, but you really walk through into all these little rooms. You got to see the story kind of untold. It was creepy. It was dark. Yeah. Totally different vibe. The underrated Horned King villain is in that location. So it was a fun, different one. But I experienced it like right before it closed.
And for me, it was like, I remember when Black Cauldron came out when I was a kid, and it was so scary. I only watched it once, and then I wasn't sure if I could handle this face-to-face with the Horned King. Obviously, I survived here today.
There's other creatures in there too, besides the Horned King. There's dragons and some other things, right? Not the only dragon in castles.
Yeah, and speaking of dragons, nowadays the only castle that we have now with the dragon is the Chateau de la Bois, which is always a mouthful to say, and it means Sleeping Beauty Castle. And it's home to actually two attractions. There's a walk-around gallery where you see the story of Sleeping Beauty told through magnificent illuminated manuscripts, stained glass windows, and tapestries. And then downstairs in the dungeon, we have a dragon. We call that attraction a Tenier. And then I'm cut out because... So I'll just use American terminology. The Dragon Slayer and Sleeping Beauty's Castle. See, now it works. It was really a unique thing to work on. And I think it's like 80 feet long and 30 feet high. And it was very much of a challenge to tuck underneath that berm that we built next to the castle.
This photo makes me very nervous, by the way. I don't
Don't try this at home.
This was one of my favorite parts of visiting the castle in Paris earlier this year when I went to see the BDX droids. I think there's something really special about how it's kind of hidden, but if you know it's there, you know, and so you feel like you've discovered something special.
Right, it's very much intended to be a surprise. And it's kind of in the category of things I guess you could call plussing, which is something that Walt Disney began the day after Disneyland opened, walking around saying, wouldn't it be better if we had something else here? This seems a little weak over here, let's add something. This looks unnecessary, people don't like that, so let's subtract that. But it's all part of this plussing and making better every day. So it's a living project, unlike a film.
I think a good example of that for us is a couple of years ago, Katie and I both got to work on Cinderella Castle. So we had it open for a while, and we went in there to do some rehab work, and a lot of it was driven by the work that Katie had done.
Yeah, it was a really exciting project. You know, we got to pick a new color palette, which, you know, is one of my favorite things to do. And then we got to add a lot of gold elements, but we also added Cinderella's mice to it for a really great seek and find for our guests.
I just love all of these details. And what an amazing and beautiful term that plussing is, that it, you know, distinguishes the live experiences from the permanent source material of the film. And I'll be honest, you know, going back to the drawbridge we were chatting about earlier, I only recently learned that this drawbridge was functional. I think that's incredible. I'd also like to talk about one of our favorite castle features, which are the nighttime spectaculars. All right, that's show fans in the audience. And to do that, I'd love to bring out an expert from Disney Live Entertainment to talk a little bit more about that. So everyone, please welcome show director James Silson.
Hi.
James, welcome. Welcome to our castles panel. My first question is how? How do you plan anything this big? Tell us everything.
How much time do we have? I got very fortunate in this company to get the chance to direct several spectaculars for Disney parks, Illuminate in Shanghai Disneyland, Momentous in Hong Kong Disneyland, and then right here in Walt Disney World, Happily Ever After, which I think it's one of my favorites too, so I appreciate that. But you know, it always starts first, as anything at Disney does, which is with the story, right? We're storytellers first. We decide on the theme, we decide on what kind of message we want to deliver to our audience, right? Because this is that final kiss goodnight night. This is that last dose of Disney magic that we give to our guests before they leave our parks. And so, it's really important to us. But the next question that we ask is, what role does the castle play in that story? Because this castle is the icon of the parks, right? Like that is what people are seeing when they enter, and that's what they're going to see as they're leaving. And so we really want to make sure that we don't lose the importance of that. And so, as an example, in Happily Ever After, we decided to make the castle really a character in the story. So just like in that storyline, our characters go on this journey of pursuing their dreams and finding their happily ever afters, so too does the castle. The castle dreams, the castle journeys, the castle has fun with friends. The castle, discovers romance and faces adversity and, finds its happily ever after. And there are a couple of moments in that production that I think really exemplifies that. One is, as you guys have all seen it, so these moments. There's in the friendship section, there's a moment when the castle suddenly forms a mouth, right? And starts singing along. That's what friends are for. Right there, that is an example of how we personify the castle, give it a personality. And it feels right, and it feels right because in the beginning of the show, we allow the castle to have a personality, even if you're not really aware of it. And then another moment, my personal favorite, is during the adversity section. We have a moment where the characters battle around the castle, and the castle itself is really under attack. And in the aftermath of that battle, we're, as an audience, watching this castle, and we see this castle in ruins, in embers, and if you've been in that audience, it's silent, right? It's just this moment of everyone really emotionally connected, and yes, we're emotionally connected to the character stories, but we're really in that moment emotionally connected to the castle. We're relating to this castle, we're seeing this castle destroyed, and we want anything to see that castle come back to life, right? And then Mufasa makes his entrance, he says those iconic words, remember who you are, and in that moment, the iconic castle comes back to life, and not only does it become what it once was, but it goes beyond that and becomes greater than it's ever been in that moment of triumph as it arrives at happily ever after. So, that's a great example of how, emotionally connected we can be to these structures, and it's a real testament to the team here and teams that across the globe, the WDI teams who bring these castles to life, because truly they are iconic masterpieces, but there's so much heart in them that we as an audience, I think, really connect with them as well. Thank you. I know that it was a long speech to talk about it, but I'm very passionate about this. Just telling the story of these castles is amazing. So.
Yeah, I'm also curious, when you were designing the show, and maybe I'm getting too far in the weeds here, how do you do that from a technical perspective? Is it happening at the same time the castle is being built? Is it happening just after? How does that work?
Yeah, every single project is a little bit different. Obviously, Happily Ever After, Cinderella Castle's been here since the beginning, and there's been lots of different spectaculars that have taken place upon that castle. And so we had the luxury of going and testing content and seeing how that might register and read. But like an example, Hong Kong Disneyland, when we worked on Momentous, in that storyline, we wanted the castle to embody the timepiece and our characters to go on this journey of childhood into adulthood and beyond, and let that castle kind of be a representative of time passing. But the interesting thing was that there was no castle. Because at that moment, while we were designing the show, our Walt Disney Imagineering friends were designing and constructing the additional part of the castle that now has become the Hong Kong Disneyland castle that we all know and love. But it was a tremendous partnership. Our Walt Disney Imagineering team really helped us out, giving us the 3D models to work with, and digital models to work with, and so we were able to test that stuff in the digital space, and then come to the location and see it come to life. I think the other thing that was really fun for me was to have the opportunity to connect on things like some of the materials, on the decor side, of what might take projection better. And so, the castle really, in that collaboration with WDI, really became a great canvas for us, which I think was really, really fantastic. fantastic. The other thing, I'll just mention this real quick, is how that castle is constructed. You guys have probably seen some of the video content playing here, but you know, I was not a part of this. Well, just my attorney friends were a part of this, but I got to see some of it, and how it was built in modular pieces, and then each module was brought to the site, and then installed individually as they kind of built the castle and building blocks. I'm pretty sure that's the first time that's ever happened. And what a successful venture that was. If you ever get a chance to see it in person, it is one of the most stunning castles I've ever had the pleasure of being around, and also obviously putting a spectacle upon it. So really fantastic. And thanks to these guys.
Especially how Disney Live Entertainment brings these castles to life. Let's give James another round of applause.
Thank you.
That was amazing. We were talking to James backstage, and I thought, wow, the way you guys do the way you guys do storytelling on castles is so remarkable. Sometimes we cook up things or maybe bake them up just a little bit differently. And with that, we'd like to take you on a journey of some unusual castle overlays. And this is the 25th anniversary castle. You know, as a designer, Tom and I were talking about this. As a designer, I love this thing. Sometimes designing is about, you know, throwing caution to the wind, taking all the risks, getting a little crazy, and this thing does all three of those in spades. It's absolutely incredible. I didn't get a chance to see it in person. I remember my mom came back from vacation and was showing me the photos of the castle. I was like, oh my God, this breeder names. But I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I know, it still kills me that I didn't get to see this one in person. It's just over the top audacious. Somebody did the math that it was going to be like 55,000 tablespoons of cooking measurements, as he did, yes. But it was just a fun overlay for it. But it wasn't the first birthday cake overlay. There was another one a couple years before that.
That's right. One day I went out to Paris on one of my business trips and walked into the park and saw the strawberry shortcake castle. And well, there was a lot of debate, a lot of different opinions about it. Some people thought it was a delicious idea, and other people thought it was distasteful. But the French folks really loved it. The audience, which is what counts, thought it was a grand idea. And the only problem was one day when I went out there, a few days later, and looked into the moat after there had been a rain, there was the moat had turned pink. All the water was pink, Pepto-Bismol colored. And so I'm sure that informed some of the procedure following that, how they would do the next beautiful cake castle.
And there's one cake that didn't get baked. This one's from the Walt Disney Archives. This was to celebrate Mickey's 60th birthday, and they thought, let's put a cake on the Carousel of Progress. And so I love this one because we all know the carousel keeps turning, and I keep thinking of this thing as like a cake display in a bakery. Like in my head, this cake also turns. It's not a static thing at all.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask what other castle overlays have existed, or maybe ones that didn't make the cut?
Well, we did build another one that was based on Festival of Fools, and that did make the cut. And this came out pretty much day and date with The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was an extremely popular film in France. It did very well. And so, hey, why not? As long as it's just for a few months, which it was. And people had a lot of fun with it, and I think it was very successful.
And this next one is one that didn't make the cut, like Michelle just talked about. This was for Disneyland's 50th. This is where Elliot was gonna light some candles. And we think this is a Joe Cicero drawing, which is funny because Tom and I were talking, I think Joe also did the Winter Castle that I'm so impressed with at Winter Sunland.
And then there was one to celebrate Disneyland's 50th here at Walt Disney World. They did this version of it here with gold characters all about it, and do is some of those characters still live on here in Orlando, but not on property. They are actually at Advent Health for children, hospital for children at the Walt Disney Pavilion. So we're able to reuse them, and they live on over there now.
And then there's one castle overlay to end all castle overlays. That's the one that wiped away the competition.
Another thing we do is we use specialty paints. So think metallics, iridescents, and that it really evokes the feeling that royalty lives in these castles. And lastly, we use high-performance coatings on the roofs. And we have to do that to protect from the elements. But the cool thing that we do is we're able to do accelerated testing on all these coatings, so we know that they'll withstand the UV and the elements for at least 10 years.
So I think knowing this, and Katie's worked on the castle directly, and the paint is such an important thing. And today we want to introduce one new paint scheme that is coming here to Cinderella's Castle at Magic Kingdom. We are bringing back a classic color scheme to the castle.
the next episode of We Call It Imagineering, premiering September 8th on YouTube. So you know what they say, you gotta be sure to like and subscribe. But we're actually really excited to give you a sneak peek of that episode right now. But before we roll the clip, please join me in thanking all of our incredible panelists. Let's give them a thank you.
Here we are at the Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland, where it all began. Tom, why a castle?
Castles have been talked about in stories for centuries to all cultures. Everyone really recognizes it as symbolizing dreams and aspirations.
These oval windows are not only just really pretty to look at, they also give a unique, very recognizable statement on the facade of this castle. You only have to show our guests here a picture of this castle once, and they will remember and identify this design specifically with Paris.
I'm here at Shanghai Disneyland, home to a beautiful enchanted storybook castle.
Look at the beautiful terrace that's reaching up to the sky. It is reaching up to wishes and dreams and hopes.
We had a castle there, and then we said we need something different. How do we approach building a castle on top of a castle?
Abu Dhabi is a city on the water, and so we're really excited about being able to incorporate water in the design of our castles.
We're taking our iconic castle to the sea with our newest ship, the Disney Adventure.
When you step into our park, you see the castle, and we want that to be just a great moment. We're always so excited to work on a new scheme for the castle. We've updated the color every time we've repainted it. We want to make sure that every guest that comes has the opportunity to get a really beautiful picture on it.
This is something that you can only experience in the park, the whole other level of the emotion, which is what we do here.
You won't want to miss this episode of We Call It Imagineering.